Thank you very much for having me, Michael, and hello, everybody. Some of you have probably seen me at the various ADI expos over the years. Originally a Luxul guy, Legrand AV bought us, about 3 years ago or so, and now all those brands fall under me at ADI. So Luxul, OnQ, Nuvo, Chief, Sanus, and Middle Atlantic racks. So we're pleased to have our technical trainers with us today to do the nuts and bolts of this, which are Jared Edwards and Ryan Harter. Great guys, do lots of Luxul training, lots of webinars as well, which I'm sure the guys will touch on as we go forward. So off to you, Jared, and thank you.
All right, well, thank you, Keith. Appreciate it. And thanks to Michael and the entire ADI crew for allowing us to be here today. And thank you, of course, for your time. We always are happy to share some time with all of you, especially in, like Michael said, these uncertain times and certainly interesting times where things have changed a little bit. Understanding that maybe you have a little bit more time to do webinars is probably not the first thing on your mind that you thought you'd be doing, maybe a month and a half ago. But nonetheless, here we are. So that brought up the opportunity to talk about remote management and what it can do and what it means for you and how you as a business can benefit from what it offers. And so I wanted to start off today with a couple of definitions here. If I can get my screen to forward, there we go. And let's start off by defining what is remote management. And we set out at Luxul several years ago to try and answer this question from the perspective of you as the dealer, and tried to say, what is it that you guys use remote management for? What is it that is most important to you? And really what came back was this very simple answer was, well, it means I can power cycle something without having to be there. And while that's very important and probably one of the most commonly used things about remote management, there really is and can be a lot more to it. And that's really what we kind of want to talk about today is the different levels of remote management. Well, of course, it can be a whole lot more. Yes, you should be able to power cycle devices. You should also be able to power cycle PoE devices from a switch. Ultimately, if you could, wouldn't it be nice to be able to have device control no matter what brand it was? So it doesn't just have to be a certain brand of equipment or a certain brand of network equipment. It could be anything and everything that's on that particular system that you or your dealer just put in. Obviously, from the perspective of ease of use, we want it to be easy to integrate and easy to get up and running. We want it to be easy to use, of course. And the ultimate goal here is to be able to do almost anything you could do as if you were there on site. The big difference, of course, is that we aren't on site. And that means we have the opportunity to save truck rolls or minimize truck rolls. One of the biggest things that is a cost thing for a lot of dealers, of course, that costs the money is I got a phone call from Mrs. Jones who has a camera that, isn't showing its image or something, or their cable box is locked up, or whatever the case is. And you know that all you have to do is get to that place, unplug the power cord or the PoE Ethernet for just a moment, and wait a few seconds and then plug it back in and reboot it, and it'll come back up just fine. But in order to do that, you have to stop what you're doing, whether you're at your office, whether you're on another job site, and leave that and get in the van or the truck and drive over to Mrs. Jones' place and reset all, power cycle these devices that she's having problems with. And certainly that's very inefficient. And so really what remote management allows us to do is make a dealer more efficient and therefore much more profitable. Because now we're not stopping what we're doing just to go over and power cycle a device somewhere else. We're actually now going and being able to do that just by a couple of clicks on our phone or tablet. Or if we're at the office still, you can do it from your computer and you don't have to roll a truck out. Now, a lot of times there's also a benefit, of course, to the end user. And that benefit is that you're now able to take care of whatever problem they may have very, very quickly. They don't have to wait for you to get there. And so there's benefits on both sides of the fence as to what remote management can allow us to do. And we talk about remote management. And in a few minutes, I will give you a term that I like to use instead of remote management, and I'll explain why it is I like to use that term. So let's talk about the different levels, of course, that remote management has. And the first one is a very simple type of auto healing or auto pinging, things that you can set up inside devices themselves that you put into that job that allow you to have the system kind of monitor itself and then have some sort of corrective action if something goes wrong. And examples of this, of course, are self-healing PoE switches and auto ping on PDUs. And some of you may know what those terms mean, and some of you may not. And so I thought I'd go through them just real quickly here to kind of give you an idea of what is capable with both of these types of products. Excuse me. And starting with a smart PDU, first of all, let's talk about what a PDU even is. It's a power distribution unit. And the ones that I'm referring to are the ones that are controlled by IP. So they will have an Ethernet jack on them that you plug into the network, and then you have the ability to log into it and set up different things. And then, of course, you also have the ability to be able to power cycle devices on a per outlet basis, which works really, really well. Now, there's a couple of ways that you can utilize these types of products. The first way is remotely power cycling things using products like our upcoming ProWatch, which we'll talk about in a moment, and another service that we're also partners with called Domos, which allows you to log in from a phone, tablet, computer, or wherever you happen to be and whatever device you happen to have, and be able to power cycle just a single outlet for whatever device it is you need to power cycle. There's a third way, or another way that you can do this, excuse me, not a third way, another way is through a third-party control system. So for those that use any of the below listed systems, whether it's Savant, Control4, URC, Creston, or RTI, they do have a driver that you can use in their system, and now you can put buttons into that automation system to power cycle a particular port or outlet, excuse me. So, for example, you've got somebody, let's say they've got a large office space, and they happen to be running a Crestron system. You can actually give them the ability to press a button and have it send a command to power cycle an outlet on one of these PDUs. And if you're comfortable with doing that, if the customer's savvy enough to understand what's going on there, then certainly that capability is there with our PDUs. The last one is the one that I referred to a moment ago, which is the self-healing part of it. And this is where the ability for it to manage and kind of monitor itself and then have a corrective action if something goes wrong, this is where this comes into play. And as you can see here, basically what it does is it allows an outlet to ping a device. So in other words, the PDU will send a request out to a particular device on that network that says, hey, are you still there? And it sends it every 30 seconds or every so often to say, hey, are you still there? Are you still there? Are you still there? And the device responds, yes, I'm all fine. Everything's good. Well, if that connection is lost and the PDU sends out the "Are you there?" and does not get a response back, certainly it will try a couple more times. Generally, it tries 2 or 3 or 4 times, depending upon what you've set up in the system. And then it will have a corrective action. It will say, if I ask so many times and do not get a reply back, then I'm going to assume that device is not online anymore, and I'm going to power cycle it in an effort to reboot it and have it come back up online. Certainly not a 100% foolproof system, because sometimes there is something more severe wrong than a simple power cycle can fix. But most of the time, a simple power cycle will fix these problems, and usually a device just kind of sometimes goes off into the weeds somewhere, and a simple power cycle will bring it right back, and it will come back up online, and everything's fine. The great thing about this type of system is that it requires no intervention from the dealer whatsoever. It all happens automatically. It happens in the background. And that is a great way to do it for devices that are plugged into a power outlet. Well, what about devices that don't run off of a power outlet? They're PoE devices like IP cameras or access points or touch screens or other things like that. Well, there is a similar option as well. And so let's talk about managed PoE switches for just a moment. I'm sure that most of you are familiar with the basic two series that the Luxul family has. And the first one's called the AV series, which essentially means the ports are all on the back. The second one is called the security series, which means the ports are on the front. Now, please don't misunderstand. These are simply marketing terms. And so a switch is a switch is a switch. You can certainly have audio video equipment plugged into what we market as the security series with ports on the front. And you can also have security cameras plugged into the AV series, which is ports on the back. It really just comes down to what fits your installation best. And if you want ports on the back, we have a solution. If you want ports on the front, we also have a solution for that. Now with those, of course, most of those switches are managed PoE switches. And there are two things inside those switches that are relevant to today's discussion. And the first one is scheduling on those switches. And some of you may have seen this or actually have maybe even used it inside the switches. And this is for that case where you want to have a schedule set for the PoE power to be on or off of a particular port. And you can do it on a per port basis. So let's say that somebody has cameras all over their home, and they have some on the inside of their home as well. But they want those to be turned off, during the night or during the day or whatever the case happens to be. And in this example, let's say that those cameras are on ports 3, 4, and 5. Well, you can see by the green check mark there that I have something set up on a schedule. And what this allows you to do in the switches is go in and actually set up when you want the power to be on for that device and when you want it to be off. And again, like I said, you can set it on a per port basis. And now it's automatic. They don't have to press a button. They don't have to do anything. The power will shut off of that port at whatever time is specified, and then will automatically come back on at whatever time is also specified. So it's really kind of a nice little feature that's already built into the switches. And again, kind of a self-management type of situation. The other one that is also very, very helpful is what we call our self-healing switches. And what this does is similar to the PDUs, allows you to type in an IP address and set up a particular address for a particular port on the switch. And there's lots of different parameters here, of course, that you can set up. But similar in concept to what we talked about with the PDUs, you do have the ability for it to ping a device, and if it loses its connection to that device, it will it will automatically power cycle the PoE from just that port. It doesn't shut the whole switch down, doesn't shut off all of the ports that are PoE enabled, just the one that you've specified. And so you have the ability now to, let's say it's an IP camera, and that camera goes off in the weeds for some reason and isn't providing an image and certainly isn't recording on the NVR. If it loses its data connection, which is generally the case, we all know IP cameras never lock up and have to be rebooted. So, if that's the case, then this is a way that you can actually have it set up to do it for you automatically without having to be involved and roll a truck just to do so. Now, again, is it 100% foolproof? Certainly not. Sometimes a power cycle does not bring that camera back up. But in a lot of cases, it certainly does. And so this is a way that you can take advantage of that. And again, this is built into the Luxul managed switches that have PoE in them. So a great little feature there on those two products. Level 2 takes it to a whole different level, pun intended, so to speak. And this is where it comes into being should and can be so much more. Because yes, you can do a few things that are automatic that you can set up, and those can certainly service a few devices. But what if you wanted full control of almost every device that you put into that system? Not just the network, not just the devices that happens to be under some sort of power control. You want to be able to do things like somebody calls up and says, I want to change my Wi-Fi password, or I want to change the angle or the zoom of that PTZ camera. Well, you can do things like that, but you need a little piece of software in order to make that happen. And that's where some of these services come in that we'll talk about now. What remote management software does and how it kind of works is it generally runs either in the router, or there's a separate box that you can put onto the network, depending upon which system of software you're looking at using. All of those pieces of software connect to the cloud without any sort of port forwarding or VPN done on the network. So there's a couple of advantages there. First off, this goes back to the making it very easy for you to deploy and set up, because there is nothing extra that a dealer has to do in order to do this. The advantage to the end user, whether it's a home or a business, is that you're not opening up any sort of holes of security inside their network in order to do this. Like I said, it just connects to the cloud just like a Nest thermostat does, or a Ring doorbell, or a DDNS for an IP camera. Same type of concept. So there's no security that's being loosened by putting something like this in. Again, like we've kind of mentioned, it does now provide management of that site from a computer, a tablet, or a phone. Now, there are differences, of course, within different pieces of software. Some provide access only to the network equipment that you put in. Some of them only provide access to certain brands of equipment. Certainly, you can see some examples there. Oversee, the one that I didn't mention, but that I should have, was Ubiquiti's Cloud Key. Very, very good at getting into Ubiquiti devices, but that's where it ends. Doesn't get into other devices. So there's other pieces of software that'll provide you access to every device on the network, regardless of brand. And some of the examples there are Domotz and our ProWatch. And this is where you can see the bottom bullet there. This is what I like to call complete system management. No longer are we just talking about remote management of the network devices, but now we're talking about the ability for me to manage every device that I put out into that system from a remote location. And that's where real power to the dealer starts to come in. We now have the ability to be much more efficient in the way that we do business, and the way that we be able to interact with our customers and take care of their needs or problems on a very, very rapid basis. And like I said, if you can do this with pretty much every device that you put into the system, then things start to actually become very, very easy for you to manage. So some of the features of those types of softwares that I call full feature softwares, they will do things like you enable them on the system. And with ProWatch, actually, it's already enabled, so it all just starts working. It will automatically go out and find every device on that network. Everything that's plugged into a network, it finds. And it will then list them for you. And I'll show you examples of that here in just a moment. But it will list all of those devices. It will then give you a status on what the devices are doing, whether they're on the network, whether they're off, in other words, whether they're offline or online. It will give you the ability to see which device is plugged into which port on a switch. This does require a managed switch, of course, because it does need to be able to read what is the information that the managed switch provides. But it eliminates the need for you to go out and say, all right, this device is on port 1, this device is on port 2, this device is on port 3. And all of that is just kind of mapped and populated for you automatically. So it works really, really well. Again, another way to make it easy for you to deploy and to start using. Certainly, remote rebooting is a large feature of these types of software, whether it's power cycling via PoE switch or PDU. Certainly both are capable. And I will mention on the PDUs that is the one place that auto discovery of the device does not happen. Of course, when you just plug a device into an electrical outlet, there's no network discovery there. So you do have to tell that outlet what device is plugged into it so it will show up in the software appropriately. Now, one of the things that is nice about the ProWatch software that we'll talk about in a moment is that if you have labeled those devices inside the menu system of your PDU when you're setting it up, ProWatch will automatically read that and populate those lists for you inside its software, so you don't have to do double duty there. Firmware updates is another big one. It will alert you to some of the devices if there's a firmware update. Not all of them, of course, but it does try its best to figure out if there's a software update for the devices that's an available feature on. And then, of course, you have the ability to get in from what we call a web app, which is where you'd use a computer, or a mobile app for both iOS and Android. Now, the last bullet point on this list, the remote device connection, is really where the fun begins. This is where it starts to open up for devices that are other than the specific brand of device. So in this case, let's say Luxul. Obviously, you can get into much more devices than that, regardless of brand. And I'll show you some examples of that here in just a moment. But this is where things get fun and where that complete system management terminology starts to come into play. So we're very excited with our software to be able to offer this so that it's not just getting into a particular brand or our brand of device. It's pretty much everything, as you'll see here in a moment. So a couple of options, like I mentioned. Domotes has been around for a number of years. We have been partnered with them, as I'm sure most of you know, for a number of years as well. And that partnership is going to continue. That's not going anywhere. It is still going to be built into our routers. It is still, their agent still runs independently inside the router. And we're excited to be able to continue our partnership with them. So for those of you that have used Domotes in the past, that may have had a question as to what the future is with Domotes, with us coming out with our own product, it is not going anywhere. If you're in that ecosystem, you are absolutely able to stay inside that ecosystem and to continue to use it. And it's a great product, and I've got a few screenshots here in a moment to show you. We are, as I mentioned, launching our own remote management software, which is called ProWatch. It will be launching on May 15th, and we're very, very excited about that. So I thought I'd give you a little bit of a preview as to what ProWatch is going to do, what it's going to look like, and that type of a thing. So again, to reiterate, what ProWatch is a cloud-connected piece of software that allows you to remotely manage your customer systems. Now, you'll see here that a lot of homes are listed, but that doesn't mean that it's only for residential by any means. This is just a preliminary screenshot. You have the ability to name these locations whatever you'd like. So if you're doing something for, Johnson's Dentistry, you can put Johnson Dentist Office on there. It's completely customizable to name it whatever it is you'd like to name it for. The great thing about ProWatch is it is going to be free for dealers. There is no charge for this. It's one of the things that Luxul and Legrand are able to provide to you as an extra service without charging for it. So we're very, very excited about that. The default view that you will get will be a map view similar to this, which will be color-coded to show you what devices and which pins for which locations you have are online and running, which ones may have a problem. And the great thing about this is, let's say that you start getting phone calls from a bunch of customers that say, hey, I don't have internet access anymore. Well, you pull ProWatch up and take a look at the main screen here, and if an entire area has a bunch of red pins all over it, then you can be pretty assured that that's not a problem with your systems. It's most likely an internet service provider outage. And so just with a quick glance there, you'll be able to determine things like that. The main dashboard, of course, is going to look very similar to this, where you'll have alerts for different devices that you can set up. You'll have favorites, you'll have firmware updates, and of course, the devices tab is the one that will probably most often be used. And so if we click on the devices tab, you get the list that's shown here on the right, which it lists and shows you what every device is on the network, its IP address, its MAC address, and then there'll be a couple of options to create alerts on that, or connect to it, or reboot it and power cycle it if you'd like to. Each particular device will have its own informational page, and I like to say, having information is cool, but being able to do something about it is even cooler. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. That's, of course, on the Actions tab that you see at the bottom there. But every device will have, a listing of the information about that device: how long it's been online, what the manufacturer is, what the model is, IP address, that type of a thing. You can certainly set up alerts for individual devices or not have an alert for that device at all. The way that I explain this in simple terms is, I have a 16-year-old son, and he has an iPhone, and I really don't want to know the 400 and something whatever times per day that he clicks the power button and turns that iPhone on and off of my network. However, if I do have my modem or my router or maybe my camera NVR or one of the cameras that's critical to whatever it's displaying for the business that it's working in, maybe if that goes down, that I want to know about because that's critical and I need to get there or be able to do something and have an action that I can fix it very quickly. So all of these things are very, very customizable with how you want to do it. And of course, you do have the ability to just have a regular push notification sent to a mobile device, or you can get a text, or you can get an email. It's your choice as to how you'd like to have that set up. Again, with the alerts, it will show you when the device was disconnected, reconnected. It'll give you a timestamp so that you have an idea of what's going on with that particular device. The real fun, of course, starts when we get into this Actions tab. And as you can see here, this is where you can now start to interact with this device from a remote location. If there's a firmware update, you'll be able to click the button there and just update the firmware. You'll be able to reboot it. And the software is smart enough to know if this is rebooted from a PoE switch and which port it is connected to versus a PDU that it may be connected to an outlet. The software knows which it's connected to and will power cycle the appropriate device or the appropriate port there. The real fun, of course, like I mentioned, is in this connect button. And this allows us to connect to the device no matter what brand it is. And this is where the fun really, really is. And I'll talk about that here in just a moment. This is a screenshot of what the switches are going to be. Now, please understand that a lot of these are still under a little bit of development, so there may be some changes. This is more of just a preview to give you an idea as to what capabilities we're looking at here. But with switches, it will tell you what your PoE budget is, how much of it you've used, and then it has the ability below there to list every device on which port it is. So again, this is where it's automatically discovering which device is plugged into each port, and then we'll display them as appropriate. It'll tell you how much data is flowing through that particular port, and then of course again you have the ability on a per port basis to do a one-touch power reset of the PoE control of that port, or you have a manual control that will allow you to turn that power off of that PoE until you turn it back on. So kind of nice there. Same type of concept or idea with the PDUs that we talked about before. Yes, certainly you can set up both a switch or a PDU to have the automatic management built into it, or you can have control here as well. And so again, on a per outlet basis, you have the ability to either have a one-touch reset, which will allow you to, it'll shut the power off, and then about 10 seconds later, turn the power right back on. Or of course, there is a manual on-off there that will leave the power off until you turn it back on. There is a warning window that comes up if you do that, and the reason that we have that in place is because obviously if you're talking about the modem or the router or something that's critical to establishing internet access, if you turn the power off of that device manually and it's now waiting for a command for you to turn it back on, but you are doing this remotely. Obviously, you cannot get back in because you've lost internet connection to that site, and you're going to have to go on site and turn it back on. So a few things there that you don't want to be aware of, but that's why we have a warning window that pops up and asks, are you sure you want to really turn this device off before you do it? Okay. So with that, let's jump into a couple of examples here, and I'm going to show these on the Domotz interface just so you kind of have an idea as to what that looks like if you happen to have not used it in the past. First example here, of course, is a camera system, and let's say that the customer calls up and says, I need to change the settings in my NVR, or I need to change a password on something, or the camera needs to be power cycled. Well, the great thing about this is here, again, it does not matter what brand of camera or NVR you're using. What you do is you go into your remote management software, find the device list in or find the device in the device list, excuse me, and click on that. And then in the Domotz interface, you click on the Connect tab, and then click on the Connect button. And within just a few seconds, what you will see is the actual user interface that you would see as if you had logged into that camera, as if you were there locally on site on that network. And typically you'll get a camera image if that's what the camera displays. But as you can see up in the top right there, you've got that little gear icon, which of course is the settings for that camera. And in this case, what you have the ability to do is click on that, and it takes you to all of the camera settings that are available on that camera. And again, the great thing about this is any device that has a web user interface that you can log into, you can now get into from a remote location without having to go on site. So if this was a PTZ camera, you of course would have the ability to adjust the pan, tilt, or zoom to whatever they need it to be changed to, and then save that. If they want to, change whatever setting it is that you want to change in here, you have the ability to do that. You have complete control as if you were there on site. So it makes it really, really nice, and hopefully you can kind of see how this can make your business much more efficient and run easier as a result. Next thing is, of course, another example, and this is more of a home or residential example, but still shows you the power of what these remote management pieces of software can do. And this comes from a real story, and some of you may have heard me tell this story previously or heard Keith tell it potentially. But this is a real story that happened to us at a trade show where a dealer came up and said, I think remote management is probably one of the greatest things I've ever seen used as a dealer with all my years in business. And we said, well, that's fantastic. Could you please tell us why it is you feel that way? And he says, I'm here at a trade show in San Diego, and my business, and I'm actually from New Jersey. And I just got a phone call from one of my clients saying that he cannot hear the voices very well out of his surround sound system. Well, of course, we all know that that comes from the center channel. And so he said, I was able to, from my hotel room, go to my remote management system, find his audio video receiver in the list, click on it, click on the Connect tab, and connect to his device, and then was able to get the user interface of that device as if I had gone to his house. I clicked on speakers and then clicked on the levels of that speaker and turned the center channel up a little bit and asked him if that sounded better. And he said, yeah, but could you go just a little bit more? And of course the dealer said, sure, I can go a little bit more. And so he turned it up just a little bit more. And the guy said, great, that sounds great. I can hear it very well now. And he closed the app and he was done. Now, he was, several thousand miles away from his business and from his home. The point is, it doesn't matter whether you're several thousand miles away or whether you're 3 minutes away. You still don't have to stop what you're doing just to go take care of whatever customer is calling you asking for something to be done. You can do it right there from a mobile device or from your computer and do it in a very quick and efficient manner. The benefit, of course, of this, hopefully we're kind of pounding this home a little bit, is that you really do have the ability to save time, money, and the way you do that, of course, is by minimizing truck rolls. Now you don't have to roll that truck clear across town, fight traffic for 25 to 30 minutes just to do a 10-second pull the plug and reset a device, which frankly is a lot of what people do with remote management. Power cycling is a big part of it. Obviously, the exciting part is being able to get into lots of different devices and manage them from the standpoint of doing whatever it is you need to do without having to also roll that same truck. The end result of this, of course, as you can see, and we talked about earlier, is that this makes you as a dealer much more efficient and therefore hopefully much more profitable because, again, you're not stopping what you're doing just to go take care of whatever phone call you just received from a different client. And so hopefully that kind of gives you an idea of what remote management is all about. Again, we are going to be launching our ProWatch May 15th, and we're really, really excited about that. Hopefully it's something that you can see as a benefit as well, that you'll be able to take big advantage of. With that, I'll turn it over to Josh here for a few minutes to wrap up a few things. And then I think after that, the plan is to go for questions and answers. Josh?
Thank you very much. I hope everybody's having a great Friday. I won't take much of your time. I'm the project registration team manager for ADI. Just wanted to let everybody know that we are available to you and that we're happy to help register any large projects you have coming up with any vendors. Generally speaking, we're looking at 5 to 10,000 plus orders. Your ADI local branch will reach out to us with that if you bring it into them, and we can register it with the vendor, see if we can get special pricing. We pass along 100% of the discount to you, and we just want to emphasize that everything we do with that is to help you win the job. We don't take any special margin cuts or anything like that. Everything is directly to you, and we exist solely to make that happen for you. So if anybody has any questions on that, feel free to let me know.
All right. Thank you, Josh. Keith, questions?
Yes, we do have some questions. So we have a question from Matt, was the first one in, I believe, which was for the scheduled PoE switch. Does it hurt the equipment, cameras, to be turned on and off like that on a schedule? I understand the application, but I've had customers ask about this, just don't want to limit the lifespan of any equipment.
I wouldn't think so. If it's going to limit it at all, it's not going to be by much. I mean, certainly we're dealing with electronics, and so anytime you have power going in, power going out, there's certainly the capability, I suppose, of a little bit of a shortened lifespan, but I don't think it's going to be anything that you would notice or anything. I mean, I know people that have their access points turned off every night and turned back on early in the morning, 5 in the morning or so, and they've been doing it for years and the AP still works just fine. So if there is anything, it would be very, very minor.
Yeah. Don't we normally on the camera side of things, people will do it kind of a once a month, once a week kind of a boot?
Yeah, I think once a week or once a month or so is fairly common for cameras, and I don't think it inhibits them by any means.
Gotcha. Then we had a question from Michael, who said, is there a way to manually add devices that are not auto-discovered, such as devices that are on another VLAN?
VLANs are going to be, multiple VLANs are going to be capable of being monitored in ProWatch, just like they are in Domotes. It's actually easier to do if you're running Domotes off, or excuse me, if you're running ProWatch off of a router. No, we're working on a way to manually add things, but right now there is not a button to click to search for devices. However, a workaround for that is to disable the service and then enable it again, and it will automatically go out and start to search for devices again.
Gotcha. And since you mentioned the routers, Jared, is ProWatch available on, or Domotes for that matter, on all Luxul routers?
All but the XWR 1200. That is the entry-level router. That is the only one that it is not available on, but both pieces of software are available on all the other routers.
Yes. And then all the current routers, right?
Correct, yes.
And what are the differences between ProWatch and Domotes? Why would you offer a product while still offering what's now a competitor's product?
Well, frankly, one of the large reasons is Domo's, of course, is its own company, and as a result, they charge for their service. Certainly, there's nothing wrong with that, but there are other competitors in the marketplace that also offer a free service. And so we felt that it was going to be to the benefit of our dealers to also be able to be competitive and offer a service that was at no charge as well.
Gotcha, gotcha. Let's see where we are. Got that one there. After this webinar, do you have a one-time promo code to get a bench test and mastering the product?
The Luxul product itself?
I assume so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, certainly we have our personal use program that gives you a very large discount off of dealer cost to get it for your own personal use. If that's what you're referring to, then yes, we certainly have a program that allows for that.
Yep. And then Matt also asked, can the remote management software pass through more heavily restricted networks in corporations or big offices? Does it pose any security risk to them? Would IT flag anything on the remote management aspect?
They shouldn't. Obviously, each network's a little bit different depending upon the security protocols that their IT department has set up.
Mm-hmm.
But being that it's just a cloud service and does not require anything extra to be opened up in order for this to work, it should get through to the internet as long as internet access is granted all the way to the network that you're putting this on.
Very good. Then Lee had asked, you said ProWatch will not have any charge. Does Domotes or Oversee have a charge associated with it?
Domotes does, and it depends on the version of Oversee that you use. They do have one version that is free that's natively built into a lot of their devices. They also have another version that is paid for that allows you to get into more than just Snap AV brand of devices. But that is a paid for version, whether you pay for it as an annual fee or whether you pay for it by being on one of their upper level buying tiers. Either way, you're buying enough product that you're paying for it one way or the other.
All right. Then we had two questions from Jonathan. Any surge protection offered on the PoE outputs and or PDU? And then his second question was, are voltages both high and low definable?
Currently, no. For the second question, on the first question, yes, there is voltage protection on the PDUs. It's a two-stage MOV protection. So on the switches, there is a protection circuit inside the PoE to try to eliminate over voltages. I'm not sure exactly what technology it uses, frankly, but there is a low grade version of protection there. Not certainly anything that's meant to replace, you know, a higher end level of protection like a Surgex or a Panamax or a, you know, Triplite or something like that.
Gotcha. Then Marcelo asked, how do you reboot the router without losing connectivity with the client? Does it have a timer, like 15 seconds on off?
Yes, that's the one touch button. That's the functionality, is it will send a command to the PDU to turn the power outlet off. And then about 10 seconds later, it automatically sends a command to turn it back on. So that you don't run into that scenario where you've only turned it off and now do not have a way to turn it back on.
Gotcha. Then Leslie asked, if the modem's offline and needs power cycle reboot, can that be done with the PDU since there will not be internet connectivity?
Not from a remote management standpoint. Again, if one of the critical components, whether it's a modem or a router, goes down, then most likely a truck roll is probably going to happen. However, if you do have the self-healing set up in that PDU, then it will try to power cycle it itself and try to bring the modem or the router back up by itself without you having to roll the truck out. So there are a couple of different options there.
Gotcha. Todd asked, can ProWatch be activated on previously installed Luxul equipment?
It will be able to. It will be available as a firmware update. The routers that it will run on again are the XWR3150 or the Epic 3, also the Epic 4 and Epic 5. But yes, a firmware update will enable it for routers already in the field.
Yes, and Dick Peterson's question is a little bit of a follow-up on that. Any plans for adding ProWatch to the 1200?
We would love to. Unfortunately, the memory and the chipset inside the 1200 is just not enough to run a separate service on top of being a router. So in its current hardware form, that's not a possibility, unfortunately.
Gotcha. And then we have a question from someone named Anonymous Attendee.
Woo!
How,
Great name.
Yes, how secure is the remote management software, i.e. a security risk for financial institutions?
Great question. It is actually pretty much as secure as we can make it. It does use Microsoft Cloud. It's 256-bit encryption. Again, it's as secure as you can make a cloud service. It uses the latest tools that are available in order to do that. So, if the financial institution has particular concerns, certainly they can reach out to us and we can get them more detailed information for a comfort level there, but it's as secure as it can be in today's cloud environment.
Gotcha. Well, Albert thanked us for the wonderful presentation. Thank you, Albert. It says, please follow up with me to place an order. So Team ADI, that goes. Hold on a second. Another question about the 1200, sorry to say.
It's all right.
And Michael said, web interfaces for some devices require the client to be using Windows, possibly Internet Explorer. Does this requirement remain when accessing devices via ProWatch? Does ProWatch itself have any client requirements?
No, that's a great question, Michael. No, it doesn't. Most of the uses that I've done with it have been with Chrome, but frankly, the majority of it is done on either the iOS or Android app. But no, to my knowledge, there's no requirements of using one particular browser over another.
Very good. I think we're getting near the end. I think I have some questions. We're in the chat thing here. Hopefully we'll be, hello. Leslie had asked, does it connect via P2P?
I'm trying to think. Does honestly, Leslie, I don't know the answer to that. I don't believe so. I'm assuming your question is for being able to connect to a particular device and potentially send, a programming to the automation system or something like that. It will have that capability eventually, but a straight peer-to-peer, no, I don't believe it does that.
Yeah, gotcha. And Albert we had touched on this a little bit. I'm just going to give the answer about a promo code. So Jared had mentioned the personal use program that Luxul has. If you're on there and want to write down this address, it's luxul.com/personal-use. And that is a registration thing to get a coupon code that'll let you buy a Luxul product at that discount that Jared referenced earlier. And then Ludo had asked, would ProWatch work from a small box like Domotes? I assume he's
Yeah.
about, yeah.
Another great question. Yes, we do have plans eventually to have a small box that will allow you to put it onto any network. We will not have that at launch, but that is on the roadmap.